What's in a name? That which we call a rose, by any other name, would smell as sweet. Now, who wrote that and for what context? Shakespeare, yep. Any idea of the context? Romeo and Juliet. Well done. That's actually very impressive.
I can do the whole big thing.
Right. I was going to say you win the steak knives, but then you started showing off. So there is a line which it's captivated people for centuries, and there's truth in it. In many ways, a name is just a name, and the thing in itself is not variable depending on whatever its proper noun is in any language. But I think that has some limits. There is a sense in which names are sacred. Sometimes that sacredness is fundamental, as in the case of God, or sometimes it is an inferred sacredness, or we behave as if it was sacred due to some cultural influence. So that can take on various forms. Some cultures limit the knowledge of their proper name to their closest relatives, and they've got a social name which they use in every other sphere. There are times when using a person's name is not deemed proper due to their role. So I don't think you could, for example, get away with calling a judge by their first name in a court of law. And you wouldn't greet the King of England with, "G'day, Charles." It just wouldn't be done. And I think that reflects a kind of treating names as sacred. So back in my day, when I was a kid, it was a bit of a sign of disrespect to refer to an adult by their first name. It was always Mr. or Mrs. or Miss so-and-so, or in the case of closer people, auntie or uncle. There was something too familiar about addressing elders, those older than us, by their first name. And things have changed, a lot, even since the 1990s. And honestly, it's still something that I'm getting used to. So with my kids, I'm far more comfortable with them referring to Margot, who isn't here today, as Mrs. Mac. It seems just right. So I hope you get the point. What's in a name can be quite a lot, and that's even before we consider the biblical treatment of names. So throughout the Hebrew Scriptures and the New Testament alike, names have a bit of power. So for the New Testament, just hearing that mention of Peter in the Gospel reading called to mind that naming by Jesus. "You are Simon, called Peter, on this rock I will build my church." And there was some kind of power dynamic change in that naming convention rather. But sticking with the Hebrew Scriptures for now, names are commonly treated as having some power in some way. For people, yeah, but also, very interestingly, for spirit entities, if you like. So in Canaanite religions and the other Near Eastern religions around them, it was thought that knowing the proper name of a spirit gave you control over it. So, when reading the story in the book called Genesis of Jacob crossing the Jabbok River and wrestling the spirit and demanding to know what its name is, I read that as a reflection of that kind of religious worldview. He wanted to know the name of the spirit so he could have some control over it. Indeed, and this is probably going to sound a bit bizarre to us, but I've known an Orthodox Jewish person with an interest in the Jewish mystic tradition called Kabbalah. I might even say that right, Kabbalah? Yeah. I'm going to need your pronunciation in a few things, sorry. And that in Kabbalah, which is still taught by some rabbis today, it is claimed that God's name is actually 72 letters long, and that if a person knows that true divine name, that God will respond to their requests. And it's claimed that this is what was going on when Moses was doing his miracle things. He was using the secret full name of God. That kind of sounds more like a genie to me than anything else. But if you want to go wandering down a rabbit hole, you can start looking into Kabbalah and do a search online for Shem HaMepharash, which means the explicit name, and seeing how you get on. And I'll see you on the other side.
That'd be a great word for Scrabble.
Anyway, back to the Bible. Specifically the reading from Exodus that we heard and the famous incident involving the burning bush. There's so much in this story, but I want to pay attention to just a couple of the naming conventions going on. To start, it's worth just noting something about Moses' name, which may be completely obvious to you, or it may be a surprise, but it's an Egyptian name. It carries meaning in Hebrew, to draw out, of course, but it's Egyptian. He was named by an Egyptian princess, so it's quite natural. But when you hear the name Moses, it's helpful to keep in mind the parallels with, for example, the pharaohs called Ramses. There's that same bit of the name. Tutmosis, there it is again. Tammuz, there it is again. That suffix bit that relates to Moses carries huge meaning in Egyptian. It means one who is born, child of, son of, or to give birth. So what's in the name with Moses? Well, he's a Hebrew carrying a thoroughly Egyptian name, which does have meaning in Hebrew as well as in the language of the people who gave him the name. So in a symbolic way, the name has some clear implicit resonances with Israel being delivered out of Egypt, at the very least. Out of Egypt I've called my son. So what's in Moses' name? It can get pretty interesting, quite complex. It's frustrating I've got to jump forward a bit at this point and skip over so much good stuff, but I want to come on to the name of God as shared in verse 14. So Moses asks God what God's name is and gets the enigmatic reply, Ayeh, Asher, Ayeh. Is that right? Okay, thank you. Praise God. It's made of 4 Hebrew consonants, Yod, Hey, is that right? Wow, Hey. So a YHWH, as it will be rendered for us in English in a transliteration. That is sometimes called the Tetragrammaton, which translates to consisting of 4 letters. And it's basically, you got the name of God with a 3-letter root word with a masculine prefix. And as far as can be known, this is best pronounced Yahweh. Yahweh. There was a time when it was rendered Jehovah, but this really, it's a strange Latinized version of the phrase which built on an innovation by Renaissance Jewish Bible scholars, which took the consonants and they inserted the vowels from another name of God, Adonai, and came up with this...
Hybrid?
Sorry?
Hybrid?
Hybrid. That's a very nice way of putting it. Thank you, Daniel. I was going to come up with something a little bit nastier, but anyway. But I think that pronunciation of the word, Jehovah, I think it should have just dropped out of use a long time ago. But sadly, there's a scene from the otherwise fantastic movie Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which continues to hold sway, meaning that some just assume that it's the right way to pronounce the name of God. And I've got to say, the movement called Jehovah's Witnesses don't help either. Anyway, back to the Bible again. The name Yahweh is translated many ways. So we heard it as I am who I am. But it can be I will be who I will be. There's a lot of ways it can be translated. It is completely mysterious, and intentionally so. There was a mid-20th century Jewish rabbi and Bible scholar, appropriately named Moses Greenberg. He had a wonderful explanation of the name that goes like this: my presence will be as something undefined, something which, as my nature is more and more unfolded by the lessons of history and the teachings of the prophets, will prove to be more than any formula can express. I love that. It's so good. There is always more of God's self to be discovered, but the main thing is God will be and is there amidst everything going on. A wonderful teaching by a rabbi. The other thing that came to mind is the widely applicable phrase by legendary news broadcaster Ron Burgundy. No one knows what it means, but it gets the people going. Did no one get that reference? Come on. That is unbelievable.
It's actually a Praise of Glory.
Praise of glory. I'm so sorry.
Oh, well, apology accepted.
Yeah, terrible. I should just get down from the pulpit now.
It's actually better.
Praise of glory.
Yeah, movie night.
Praise of glory. Anyway, look. So today, I kind of just wanted to beat around the bush a bit in an exploration of the name of God. But to ground it in spiritual practice for us, there are a couple of just brief things to say. One is that the old 1662 Book of Common Prayer had wisdom in introducing the Lord's Prayer by saying, we are bold to pray, our Father in heaven, and so on. We're bold to pray. It's easy to take for granted, but calling the Creator and Sustainer of the universe Father, it is a big deal. It shouldn't be taken lightly. And the other thing is a beautiful insight, which I came across through, I'm not sure if it's original to him, but I came across it through a somewhat controversial Roman Catholic priest named Richard Rohr. Now, if anyone heard a cheer echoing on the wind then, that was probably my Auntie Julie, who's a bit of a Rohr fan. Yeah, we've got another one, thank you. But he pointed out, this is so good, he pointed out that the name of God, Yahweh, is perfectly suited to be said in time as we breathe. So you breathe in on Yah, and you breathe out on way. You can practice it now or later. It means that the name of God literally becomes a prayer on our lips as we breathe the air of life which sustains us. So hold on to those things as our worship unfolds today. The name of God whispered with every single breath as the air rushes into your lungs and fills every cell in your body with life. And then with parental intimacy, as father, as mother, pray to God with love and know that you are loved in turn. The Lord be with you.